Welcome to our question and answer session with Professor Michael Clarke. Professor Clarke, good to see you. It's been a couple of weeks.
Indeed.
I have not been here, as you would have noticed. Someone else was sitting in this chair last week, Mark Austin, but I'm very pleased to be back for 1 week only before I go on leave again. But anyway, I'm here now. Let's make the most of it. As you can see from the display behind us, we are focused singularly today on Russia's invasion of Ukraine in light of what happened in Kyiv overnight. Probably worth just doing a little précis of what we saw last night, Michael.
Overnight, it was a big attack. The figures from the Ukrainians are 115 drones, 24 ballistic missiles, and 4 hypersonic or high-performance cruise missiles. The Ukrainians say that they got more than 90% of the drones, which is what they normally do. That's still a good performance. But they didn't get any of the ballistic missiles. So all 24 ballistic missiles fell. Mm-hmm. They all hit, presumably, their targets or thereabouts. And the casualty figures that we've got this morning so far, if I remember rightly, are 17 dead and 44 badly injured, though those numbers may change during the day. So it certainly left a lot of clearing up to do. The attack was concentrated on Kyiv and the surrounding areas. They also went for some of the warehouses.
Right.
So, the Russians are going for some of the comparable targets, like the Wildberries warehouses that the Ukrainians are going for. And I guess we might talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I think we will. We'll come on to how successful the Russian attack was and how the Ukrainians were unable to shoot down those ballistic missiles.
And one of the targets was this company called Epicenter, which is a Ukrainian company, which is construction and retailing. And again, they look as if they've lost the whole warehouse, which is pretty big.
Okay,
in Kyiv.
And also in the past 24 hours or so, we've had videos showing attacks. Seemingly attacks on civilians, which have been shocking to say the least. One showed a drone exploding over a beach, another one showing a drone chasing a man in a Ukrainian town, which is just extraordinary. So we've had plenty of questions about that. As always, if something occurs to you as we're going along, submit it in the chat and we'll get it put to Michael. But let's start here with these questions from Will and Ralph Taylor asking about those attacks at the market of the drone chasing a man and this explosion over a beach. First question. Are they false flags, Michael? What do you think? And are both war crimes?
I don't think they're false flag attacks. If they were, they'd be bigger and more dramatic. Both of them are remarkable, partly because they were caught on camera in very obvious ways. So the attack on the drone chasing the market trader around was in Kherson. Mm-hmm. It was first reported here by Sky that it was in Mykolaiv.
Right.
And that was due to a mistranslation, which was later corrected. And when they said Mykolaiv, I thought, okay, well, Mykolaiv, that's slightly unusual. When it was corrected later in the day, oh, no, it wasn't Mykolaiv, it's Kherson. That makes, in a way, much more sense, because the Russians have been doing this sort of thing since 2023. Because in Kherson, the Ukrainians threw the Russians out of west of the city itself and west of the Dnieper River. And so the Russians are sitting on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, lobbing shells and mortar rounds into Kherson. And they've been taking pot shots and sniper pot shots at people as they see them. So what we see, this drone chasing somebody around, a market trader, is only, first of all, it's the sort of thing that's been happening in Kherson since early 2023 when the Russians were thrown across the river. And secondly, it's what's been happening on the front lines all the time, and I've seen endless numbers of drones on both sides, of drones chasing a soldier down a trench and into the dugout or into the back of his vehicle. So it's happening on the front lines all the time. What is interesting in this case is it was caught in a very dramatic way. Nobody seems to know who took the bit of film, because this man's wife had run off quite sensibly and he told her to run away. Then he was trying to evade this drone. He's very lucky still to be alive. Is it a war crime? Well, it would only be a war crime if it is judged that way in front of some sort of tribunal. But prima facie evidence is that it is. It's a direct attack, apparently, on a civilian. Now, there was always some defence you could make. I mean, if this was in front of a tribunal, what a defence lawyer would try to argue is that this man was in some way connected to the military or was a special agent or something like that. That's hard to imagine. But the argument would have to be that this man was not a civilian and the drone was being discriminating. I don't think so at all. This is safari hunting. We saw it in Sarajevo.
Good. You moved us on. Yeah, exactly. You moved us on to that because that's the word that's been used around this.
Yeah, snipers in Sarajevo. They had competitions between themselves. So
didn't people pay to go and do it as well? There's reported.
Rumored to be. Yeah. The people, Italians, big game hunters, were invited for a huge amount of money to come and take pot shots at people. And the safari element was, 2 points for a man, and only 1 point if it was an old man, and 3 points for a woman, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
It was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. I mean, certainly safari hunting did go on among the snipers.
Yeah.
Whether tourists were brought in to have it a go I don't think it's ever been proved, but there are lots of allegations at the time. But the idea of safari hunting, sadly, goes back to sniping. It's what sniping is. But the difference now is that a sniper, even now, is a very skilled person, man or woman, who's very good with a sniper's rifle and has enormous expertise. A drone operator has some expertise, but, I mean, chasing somebody with a drone is a lot less difficult than getting a sniper's, bead on somebody, a mile and a half away. And sadly, a lot of that has gone on. So, prima facie, yes, it's a war crime.
Before we move on to the beach incident, then, you mentioned the footage, which what's fascinated me is I've been thinking about this for the past day or so. Russian drone chasing a Ukrainian man, and then it's put out by the Ukrainians. Where did the footage? What are we understanding about this footage and how it actually came that we?
Yeah, I mean,
I
think it's put out by the Ukrainians as a sort of public information propaganda exercise to say, look at what we're up against. I mean, here is prima facie an obvious war crime. There it is. Everybody can see it. It's obviously to their advantage to say, this is the way the Russians are. This is what they do. Which is not to say on the front lines it's also what the Ukrainians do. Now, there's no evidence that they're chasing civilians around inside Russia, but they're certainly chasing Russian troops around inside the trenches, which is, allowable, if you like, in terms of war. That's the same as being a sniper in wartime. Just drones make it a lot easier.
Yeah, we've seen some of that footage. In fact, our John Sparks sent some excellent reporting this on our website of exactly that, Michael, of fighting on the front line with drones and of Russian soldiers being chased in and out of dugouts into buildings.
It's horrific. I mean, if you put yourself in the position of a soldier, because you can't you can't run underneath something because it'll just explode on top of you, and you can't hide because it knows where you are. Your only option is to try to destroy it with a shotgun or rifle. You've got to shoot it down
before it gets you.
Yeah, or persuade it to go somewhere else. But there's no escape from once it's locked onto you. There's no escape unless you can persuade the drone operator to go somewhere else.
And also, obviously, of course, the danger of it as well, but there's that noise that's being made as well by that thing. It must be a completely horrific position to be in. And we actually saw some of the use of drones, not in this war, but in the war in Gaza. If you remember when Yahya Sinwar was killed, that Israeli drone that kind of flew into a building.
Flew straight
and we saw
into him.
He sees it, he tries to bat it away.
That's right. I mean, it's psychologically, I don't think anybody's quite got to the bottom of this yet. I mean, armies throughout the 20th century lived under artillery fire. And under artillery fire, you dig down and you sort of hug the ground and you take your chances that the artillery falls somewhere near you, and you just take your chances. But with drones, they're so discriminating and they can be so precise. You can't just take your chance. If a drone has spotted you and you're regarded as an enemy, it's very hard to live through that.
Well, I suppose they can also be both ways. They can be discriminating and also indiscriminate, can't they? Because I suppose they could have an artillery-type shell that has a blast radius of X
50 metres,
right?
50
so
metres.
they can do both things to you as you're under in a trench.
Yeah, it can. But whereas soldiers could live with the psychology of being under artillery bombardment or mortar attack, you're just living the life of statistics. It'll get 5% of us, and I might be in the other 95%. But with a drone attack, it's very hard to just believe in the law of averages.
Let's move on to the beach incident then. So what do we understand happened there? Where was it, and what actually happened?
Yeah, it's Ganelchik. Since southern Krasnodar. The actual resort was called Archipo Osipovka. And it is a very popular beach resort. And what you see is this drone, and I saw the full video, which we weren't showing yesterday. We weren't showing the full thing. But I saw the full thing the night before. And as the drone, you can see it flying straight and level, quite low. It certainly looks like a Ukrainian drone.
It's identifiable as a Ukrainian drone, is it?
Yes, yeah. As far as I can, I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, and you can hear a lot of machine gun fire. So people on the ground were clearly firing at it because it was flying low and relatively slow, as they do. And then it drops and it goes into a bit of a circle and drops in a curve and hits the beach. I don't believe that drone was aiming at the beach remotely, and it was quite a big, heavy explosion. But not the sort of explosive you'd use to target people directly, if that was the intention. I'm certain in my own mind that drone was intended for somewhere else and some other target, and it was brought down. That doesn't change the point that the Ukrainians are still responsible for that. If you send off a munition and the other side shoots it down, you are still responsible. It's got to land somewhere. If in this case, it landed, among people on the beach. But the Ukrainians are still responsible for that, even though it's not what they intended. Now, is that a war crime? I would say no. On the other hand, the Ukrainians should still have to justify it, because the argument legally is, well, was it a reasonable action to send a drone off to a legitimate military target?
What is around there then? Do we know what the area is?
Well, Putin's palace, his famous palace.
Is that a legitimate target?
Well, it would be. I mean, that's a leadership target, and this was the palace that was identified by Navalny, Alexei Navalny,
The famous YouTube video that got him in so much trouble. Yeah,
that's right. And that palace is about 20 kilometres away along the coast, more or less in the direction that I thought the drone was probably heading in, just from the footage I could see. But I mean, that's just a guess on my part. But I'm sure it was heading somewhere else and was brought down. But the Ukrainians have still got to answer for the fact that did they take reasonable care to make sure that this drone had a good chance of reaching its target and that it wasn't flying over a heavily populated area. By and large, it wasn't, because it came in from the seaward side and down this is onto the Russian coast. So it was fired across the Black Sea and then came down just as it was crossing the coast, it seems.
Interesting. Just to sort of follow on to the market seller question here from Al, who asks whether or not that drone there could have been guided by AI. Either AI or just some very
I doubt it. Very much doubt it.
Operator.
Yeah, I think it's an operator playing games. Because
why are you so sure that it wouldn't be AI? Because isn't that the way that it would behave to try and take its target?
It might, but the reason I don't think it would be AI is because when the best use of AI with drones, and we're not sure the Russians have really got into this yet. Into AI. I mean, the Ukrainians have only begun to get involved in it, though they're ahead of the Russians. But the way to use AI with drones is use them with several drones. Right. In other words, that a group of drones are all talking to each other and deciding amongst themselves with AI where to put the benefit of their attack, which ones to ignore, where to back up an attack or something like that. And the whole AI rationale is to be able to control lots of drones without having to have an operator behind every one of them. So it's plausible just about that this could have been an AI attack and the drone was directed on any human being moving about in that area. But to be honest, I don't believe it, because it just looked so like the things we've seen on the front line for the last 3 years.
Interesting. But, I mean, not to labour the point too much, Michael, but I guess because you can't rule it out, it could be, because that is the fear about these AI drones, isn't it? That they will just be targeted on humans. You'll set the parameters for it to attack a human. It just goes after a human target. Yeah,
it's possible, but I don't think so in this case, is what I'm saying. Because I think you'd see AI operating where drones are being used in swarms. That's where AI really scores. And the Russians aren't so far ahead in AI and drones at the moment. They will be soon, but not yet.
Let's just pause there for a second to plug something that you're involved in, Michael, as part of Sky. If you love this analysis, and if you want more of it, I will encourage you to hear more from Michael, as well as my colleague Deborah Haynes and other experts on defence, because we have launched a subscriber service called Sky News Defence Insider. You'll see it's got Michael Clarke's face on it, so you're going to want to click on it. If you are interested in it, it's going to launch very soon. There's a free trial coming, so you can register your interests by clicking on a QR code that I'm told will appear on screen right now. So I can't see it, but it will do, I'm sure. Liam's out there fixing it.
Apparently, I'm told it's launching on the 7th of September.
Should we tell them what it is? So it's basically going to be a space where you get to be you, sort of unencumbered by the rest of
stuff. So I'll tell you a couple of things that we've already got involved. So we've done something on the flashpoints around the world, what I call the spring-loaded traps. And we looked at 14 different spring-loaded traps around the world and explained what they are. And then we've done something else on what is sixth-generation warfare. In a bit more detail, what is it? Yep. We're doing something at the moment on the 25th anniversary of 9/11. Right. Putting some perspective on it, not just going over what happened. Everyone will be doing that. We want to do something a bit different and say, well, what does it mean? How to interpret it? So that's the idea. We do more in-depth things than we've got time to do on television.
Looking forward to it. I'll be a subscriber, of course. And if you are interested, as I say, there'll be a link on screen pretty soon. You can register your interests and get a free trial and get more of Michael. Who wouldn't want some of that? Let's move on with the questions that we've had come in over the past 24 hours or so. Mandy's asking now about those warehouses that you were talking about, Michael, the Wildberries one. Mandy asks, is it a legitimate target, or is overlapping warehouses the reason they appear to be continually attacked by Ukraine?
Yeah, it is a legitimate target insofar, but is it proportionate? Would be the question.
Is it legitimate? Because all the reporting suggests that it's like an Amazon equivalent.
It is, but
why would that be fair that you could hit sort of
because
civilian?
Wildberries itself advertised until about a week ago when they took it down on the website that they serve the military.
There we go.
And they advertised all the things they do. So they provided a lot of helmets and body armor, but lots of components to weapon systems. And they boasted about how much help as part of their advertising that they are giving to the special military operation. So there you go. Now, they've taken all that off their website. And the argument in Ukraine is, look, this is a company which helps the military, so it's a legitimate target. But of course, I mean, hitting Wildberries is hitting the Amazon of Russia. It's Russia's single biggest company, retail company, and it is the most indebted company in the whole of Russia. It's carrying the biggest debt. It's carrying debt from one particular state-owned bank. And if Wildberries goes down as a result of these attacks, then it'll probably take the bank with it, and it might cause a banking crisis. So what the Ukrainians look as if they're hoping is that their attack on Wildberries, A, brings it home to the Russian population, B, causes disruption in the retail market, C, and the retail market, incidentally, it's causing immense suffering to all the small enterprises that have their stuff in Wildberries warehouses, and they've lost it, and they've lost everything. Some of these companies are looking at now at real destitution because, small outfits that were just supplying, little craft items and all that, they've lost all their stock and they've got nothing else. So it has that effect. And then also, I mean, the Ukrainians are saying, well, it's also reducing the military capacity in components, which it is to a degree. But the argument would have to be, I mean, I keep saying, this is, having defended themselves against the Russian bear since 2022, they've now decided to poke it in the eye because this is something which will enrage the Russians and the Kremlin, and they're now hitting back as hard as they can with ballistic missiles, and they're targeting similar sorts of targets now in Ukraine. So it's taken the war to a new level of destruction.
That was going to be my question then. So how are you and your guys seeing this? Is this a ratchet? Because it feels to me like a ratchet. Because obviously those Wildberries warehouses have been there since 2022. You could have been targeting them from the beginning, which had the capacity. But they've chosen to do it now. And then the Russians, with their ballistic missiles, which they have huge stockpiles of, could have been targeting city centres from before. And now they are
going to do it. That's right.
Numbers. Well, so have we gone up the escalation ladder?
I think so. I mean, the Russians don't have huge stockpiles of ballistic missiles, but they have stockpiles, and they're getting more from North Korea. Yeah. We know that. So that they won't run out of ballistic missiles, and they will use them. The thing for the Ukrainians, they couldn't get at these sort of targets until this time last year when they've developed their own drones. The 5.1 is the long-range drone, and then the 5.4, the Flamingo, is the one that everyone talks about, which I now see is able to fly at less than 100 feet. So the Flamingos, they're not very stealthy. They've got the radar signature of an elephant, but they're flying so low now that they're hard to pick up. And so the Flamingos are improving all the time, the FP5, that is, isn't it? And so because the Ukrainians can do this, they're now hitting these warehouses. Right. And so far, as of this morning, the last one they hit last night was number 14 of the 15 biggest warehouses, biggest warehouses. So they've actually, the Ukrainians have now, according to external estimates, have hit, damaged or destroyed 60% of Wildberries' storage capacity. And
when they hit these warehouses, what kind of warhead is on these munitions? I mean, is it like, are they catching fire and everything inside being burnt to...
Yeah, I think they're mainly incendiary. I think they're explosives, but incendiaries,
right?
Because these warehouses are extremely flammable.
Yep.
They're full of flammable materials, as you would expect. And the present estimates as of yesterday that I saw was that it's cost Wildberries about $3 billion so far in stock, or stock that they manage for other people. So it's having a big effect, and the Ukrainians are clearly hoping it will stimulate a meltdown in one of the state-controlled banks.
Move on to a question here from David Burden. Is it right to say that there appears to be a relative stalemate in the ground war, and the conflict has turned into a long-range clash, with the danger of this developing further, requiring targeting discipline to keep strikes within the two national borders? I mean, are they just throwing things at each other from distance because they can't sort it out on the front line?
Good question. Actually, no, it is a very good question. I mean, there is more or less a stalemate on the ground. The Russians are still making incremental progress towards the fortress cities. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are still the main targets. Most of us don't think that they'll be able to take them this year. although they have had some more success at Kostiantynivka that we've talked about before. But that is snail's pace stuff, and the Ukrainians are capable of hitting back locally. So the ground war isn't changing very much. Zelensky himself said about a month ago that this war is now an air war, and he's right. It is now about missiles and targeting, not aircraft, but missiles and targeting policy. And I think we're moving into a new phase of this in two ways. One is that they're both hurting each other now to a degree that it's going to push it to some sort of crisis in the war. I think the crisis is potentially worse for the Russians. The Russians are already doing most of the worst they can to the Ukrainians. If they could hurt them more, they would. And they're already hurting them as much as they can with the ballistic missiles and drones. Russia has a much greater capacity to be hurt because it hasn't been hurt very much so far as a society. And both economically, through trying to manipulate what's happening to the banks and the indebtedness of Wildberries, through the pain of petrol shortages and the shock of seeing things exploding in Petersburg and Moscow and as far away as Omsk in Siberia. The pain the Russians are feeling is greater, potentially greater. And I think the Ukrainians have decided that they're poking the bear in the eye and that the bear actually will back away because of that. Now, that's a very dangerous assumption. But in a way, the Ukrainians are escalating the nature of the war by hurting the Russians in ways that they couldn't hurt them before, and they've chosen to. Because they're saying to the Russians, we're doing to you what you've been doing to us for 3 years. Now we've started to do it to you. What are you going to do? And there's another way in which it's escalatory, which is it's having an effect at sea. So the Ukrainians have been really effective at targeting Russian ships or ships working for Russia in the Sea of Azov. They've more or less closed the Sea of Azov with more than 100, they claim, more than 100 hits since early July. In response, the Russians are now targeting international ships in the Black Sea who are trying to get the Ukrainian grain out through
Turkey,
through the Bosphorus. And suddenly now we've got a Strait of Hormuz situation developing whereby it's become dangerous to take your ship even via the safe route, hugging the coast, into Odessa or Chornomorsk, the two big ports. And that's one of the problems. I think Ukrainians may now find that their success in baiting the Russians is going to encourage the Russians now to hit commercial ships. The International Maritime Organization is shouting at both of them to stop targeting neutral ships. And the Ukrainians started this. They started targeting dark fleet tankers and Russian ships taking stolen grain, which is stolen grain, it's Ukrainian grain. They started it, and now the Russians are responding, and the IMO are going berserk because, ships with international crews on board are now in danger. Well, and the Ukrainians may lose by this because they may lose their open Black Sea. The west part of the Black Sea is open to them, may not stay open to them if the Russians are prepared to target any ships going backwards and forwards. And they've done it again today. I think it was 2 bulk carriers this morning were hit by Russian missiles, because these days missiles are much more effective than they were even 5 or 6 years ago. And so any ship is now vulnerable to missiles or drones, and they can be hit, and they are being.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people have been screaming at their screens. Obviously, the Russians started it by invading. So that was the first point. But
this phase of this phase of tactics, but the Ukrainians upped the attacks on Russian shipping, and now the Russians are responding.
And is there a mantra, escalate to de-escalate? I mean, is that something that people do try and raise it up, to try and bring it down again?
Well, they do if you're in real control, but neither side can do that.
No.
You can escalate to de-escalate if you're the dominant force, and that's what the Americans claim that they're doing in Iran. They're not really, because they're going around in circles, but they claim that they're escalating to de-escalate. It's what Israel says it's doing, escalate to de-escalate. When you're stuck in certainly a war for survival, if you escalate because you think you can get something out of it tactically. You're not sort of escalating in anticipation of a peace deal.
To David's question about the long range strikes, and I think it's fascinating how you've answered that, Michael, because from your perspective and you and your colleagues, as you're seeing this war progress and we're learning new things about the way that war is being fought, did you always assume that at some point the war would end up in this kind of standoff, long range, firing at missiles at one another's cities? Is that
no?
Because and that's my question. Are we kind of feeling our way through what the sixth generation warfare is going to be?
It's a good point, actually. Very good point. No, we didn't think the war would last this long. Right. What we thought is that this war will, I always said from the beginning, it'll get worse before it gets better. It'll get more dangerous before it's over. I always said that. and that at some point the war would have to be so painful to Russia that the Russians would look for a way to step it down, and then we'd have to move in to help Ukraine establish stability on a very unstable border. And I was saying at the beginning, I mean, this is the second Russia war on Ukraine. There will be a third and a fourth unless we can somehow move in to stabilize the end of the second. All those assumptions were reasonable in 2022, given that the war's now lasted as long as it has, and the technologies that have been stimulated by the war, particularly the accuracy and the ubiquity of drones. We could see quite early on that this was the return of industrial warfare to Europe.
Right.
You know, the wars of attrition based on your ability to produce enough stuff to actually put into the war. Given that that was becoming clear by 2020, mid-2023, I think, I started talking about the industrial war elements. Nobody quite foresaw we'd go this far, at least not in terms of the technologies. But I thought we would go this far in terms of the danger. And we're on the verge now of the Russians are under real pressure. And so if they're not going to grind their way to some sort of victory in Ukraine, which they're not, what are they going to do? And is Putin going to step down? Is he going to be removed? No. Is he going to try to, as it were, escalate this war to other members of Europe? Yes, probably. Now that he thinks that America is out of it, which more or less it is, then he has an incentive to try to frighten the Europeans into pulling the plug on Ukraine and literally stop helping Ukraine, let them lose and stop trying to support them. And that's his, in a way, that looks like his next best option, unless he's going to find a way out. But I don't think he will.
No. And that kind of analysis is what you'll find in our Defence Insider
Yes. Yes.
series that's launching really soon. So, as I say, register your interest in that. Now, I've got two questions here from Charles and from Bomber Harris about bombing, and they're in the wrong way round.
Yeah.
So Bomber Harris is asking the second question. Charles's first question. Charles's question is about what Bomber Harris did. Why is Russia not carpet bombing Kyiv, and other cities like we did in World War II? Charles asks.
Well, partly because it would lose aircraft if it did. And also remember that the Russians haven't put much of their air force into this war, partly because they're frightened. They know that Western air forces, even without the United States, are vastly superior to them in numbers of aircraft and types of aircraft. And the Russian air force is kind of holding back. It doesn't want to commit itself fully to this war because if it lost a lot of its air power, it fears then that it would be very badly disadvantaged in any future conflict with Europe. So they've been holding it back. That's one reason. The second reason is that the Ukrainians have got they lack Patriot missiles. We know that, but they've got quite a lot of other things which, apart from ballistic missiles, apart from the fact they can't really bring down ballistic missiles, they can bring down most other things.
Right.
And so they've got their own, the old Buk M1s, the old Soviet ones. They've got the S-400, S-300 system, the old Soviet systems. Then they've got the NASM system, which is this Norwegian-American system, which is pretty good. They've got the Iris-T, which is the German system. They've got the SAM-PT, which is the Italian-French system.
All the stuff for anti-aircraft, but nothing for...
Exactly, yeah. So they would actually... And they've got a lot of air defence around Kyiv. So if the Russians ever did try to fly fleets of bombers over Kyiv, or even fleets of bombers to release cruise missiles over Kyiv, they'd certainly lose some.
Interesting.
I think that's probably the answer.
And Bomber Harris then asks, why can't Ukraine strike military logistical hubs in Moscow the same as Russia is doing in Ukraine? And he finishes his question by saying, deterrence is a defence without Patriot missiles.
Yeah, well, they are trying to do that, and they have tried to. So, I mean, what the Ukrainians have done, they've hit a number of key areas, component factories. I mean, what they've tried to do is be kind of careful and look at not just sort of hitting the storage bases for weapons, but where is the key points for weapons production? What can we hit that messes up production for several months? And they have tried to hit a number of those facilities, but they've also concentrated with real success on the refining capabilities. So we've talked about this many times, that they've really hurt Russia's ability to produce fuel for its own domestic use, so that they're in something of a crisis now, which is having a knock-on effect to food production and so on throughout Russia. So in a way that the Ukrainians have been quite careful, and they're also looking at, because they know the old Soviet system, they know the way the system works, they know where the key points are, they've been very careful at going for particularly precise targets in a way that they couldn't do in the Second World War because you couldn't guarantee to hit them. Now you can guarantee to hit them. So once you know how a distribution system works, you know what the key point of failure is.
Right.
Most distribution systems have got a key point of potential failure, more than one.
Like a railway hub or something.
Exactly. So you hit the key point of failure, or the signaling system, whatever it might be, or the electrical supply to the signaling system, and so on. And the Ukrainians are quite good at doing that. So yes, they are doing it, but their strategy has clearly been, first of all, let's go for the refining capacity. They spent over a year doing that, and now it's let's go for Wildberries and their distribution capacity, and we'll see where that takes them, because that's a new element, tactical element to the way they're fighting the war.
Yeah, there's this overlap as well, because it just reminded me that Ukraine were in that 40-day campaign, weren't they?
Yeah.
That officially ended yesterday.
Yes.
Zelensky said it was a successful influence and coercion campaign, although, of course, it didn't bring the Russians to the table. So I guess that the
But it has insulated Crimea. I mean, it has done what Fedorov, who's not any longer the defense minister, said he wanted to do. He said, we're going to isolate Crimea.
Yeah.
They have, because they've closed the Kerch Strait. The Kerch Bridge is carrying only a fraction of the stuff that it would normally be expected to carry. The rail links are effectively broken. The R280 highway from Rostov into Zankoy in Crimea is effectively cut. So Crimea this summer is in quite a crisis.
Just want to circle back then to the threat to Kyiv and other major cities. So they launched 27 or so ballistic missiles last night. 26 hit their target. We don't know where the other one or something went. 17 people killed. None of them were shot down by the Ukrainian air defences. Zelensky said they need more Patriot air defence.
They do.
I mean, what are they going to do? Because in the middle of summer, winter's coming. We saw what the Russians did last winter when they were targeting.
And they'll do more this winter. Yeah,
absolutely. It's going to increase, isn't it?
It's all going to be about ballistic missiles for the next few months, because the Russians know that is Ukraine's weak spot. There's nothing the Ukrainians can do about it much.
But haven't they always known that? And this is what I'm talking about, the ratchet. They've kind of always known, but they've teased and they've pushed and they've cajoled it, and now they're at this point where they're like, we're going to start sending 20, 30 ballistic missiles in.
Every time. So, it's 100-odd drones that clears the way, uses up ammunition, and then 20, 30 ballistic missiles get through, and almost all of them get through. That's been the case. A few months ago, they were sending 6 or 8 ballistic missiles. Now it's about 20-odd. I was doing some thinking about this last night and playing with literally on the back of an envelope, as I do. How many Patriot missiles exist in Europe? All right, nobody knows. There are about 20 or 25 Patriot batteries around Europe. The estimate is probably the number of missiles that Europe has, not America now, but the number of missiles that Europe has is probably, they say, in the low thousands. So let's say 2,000, 2,500 actual missiles, which Ukraine would love to have. And Zelensky is saying, please, send us the ammunition. We've got batteries. They've got 8 or 10 batteries, maybe 12. Nobody's entirely sure, nor should we be, but they've got some batteries. But they're out of ammunition. They're not going to get any more from the United States. That's a certainty. So what could the Europeans supply? Supposing the Europeans supplied 1,000, that'd be a big number. Almost half. Let's say, I'm guessing now totally, but let's guess half of the inventory of Europe. Of the countries in Europe. Germany's got Patriots. Yep. Poland has. The Netherlands have. Sweden has.
Spain.
Greece, Spain, Romania has. So there's about 8 or 9 countries. Let's assume that between them they've got, let's say, 2,000, 2,500 in total. Supposing they sent 1,000 to Ukraine. Think about this. Every ballistic missile normally takes 2 Patriots. Usually, normally fire 2 Patriots at it, to be sure. If the Russians are attacking Ukraine with, let's guess, about 25 ballistic missiles each time, which is what they have been doing once or twice a week, you work it out that if every attack uses up 50 Patriots, two missiles for 25 ballistic missiles incoming, if every attack uses up 2 Patriots, that means that every attack takes 50 Patriots. That means that in 20 attacks, then you've used up 1,000.
It's not long.
All right. And if the Russians continue to attack at the pace they're attacking now, which is between once and like 1.5 times a week, so it's like 3 times a fortnight, these big attacks, that gives you maybe 15 to 20 weeks. That takes you into next year, but not much further. So, I wish the Europeans would give half of their inventories to Ukraine, but they're not going to. So it's going to be a trickle. And the Ukrainians have got they're going to have to live with this for the next year until the FP7 5.7, which is their ballistic
working
missile, may come along. Now, the FP7, it has the same speed as a Patriot, gets the same range, 25 kilometres. It performs the same with two limitations. One is the actual terminal interceptor is not radar controlled, it's heat-seeking. You need really specialised radar to hit in the final phase because the ballistic missile is falling. It's an object falling, but it's increasing. So it's accelerating all the time. If I remember my schoolboy physics, there's 32 feet per second. So 32 feet every second, and it squared. And so it's accelerating as it drops. And so you need a really specialised radar to intercept it as it's accelerating down its path. 5.7 doesn't have that. They have a heat seeker. Now, heat seekers work.
Why would they put the heat seeker on versus the radar?
They haven't got the radar. They don't
got the
have
tech.
a good enough radar.
Wow.
They're working on it, but they don't have it. And so the heat seeker is the compromise because the heat seeker just goes after the heat source, and it would normally get it. But if you know that the interceptor's got heat seekers on it, then the incoming missile, the ballistic missile, will have some decoys. Just throw out a heat source, and your missile goes to the wrong target. But they're working with the German companies are helping with some of the radars. Thales is helping the French company. Leonardo, the Italian company. I think it's Heinbold is the German company. There's a Norwegian company helping. So there's a number of European companies helping the Ukrainians with the FP7 to improve the missile and also give it the ground-based radars that Patriot would normally have. This is the coming trend, I think. And I'd say to everyone talks about Patriot at the moment, don't forget it. Patriot's gone as a technology. You're not going to get it. If you order it now, you're not going to get it until the 2030s. And although if you had them now, you'd fire them off. By 2030, you wouldn't want them because they're too expensive. The FP7 is a fifth of the cost of Patriot, right?
Wow.
Per missile. Each Patriot missile at the moment is about $3.5 million. The FP7 is about $650,000, $700,000. So you could have 5 of them for every single Patriot. If, with European help, the Ukrainians can make the FP7 work by, let's say, next year or at most the year after, then that is a really good anti-missile system for the Europeans as well as for the Ukrainians and those European countries that can buy into it. But there's a gap between now and then.
Yeah, and it's a gamble to buy into it if you're not certain it's going to work. The other thing to add to your calculation as well, Michael, and I brought it up while you were talking, is how long it takes to manufacture a single Patriot interceptor. 2 years, apparently, just to make one of them.
At the moment, it's Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, and their present rate of production is about 650 a year or 700 a year. It was like 2 a day is the average, and they're going to increase that threefold into 2,400 a year. And they're not going to reach that until the 2030s, until 2032, 2033.
The US have used up all their stockpiles in Iran, so there's
they've drawn down. They have drawn down over half of their stockpile of Patriots.
Wow,
over half.
And imagine how long they've been stockpiling those Patriots.
Exactly,
for as well.
over the years. That's why I say forget Patriots. You're not going to get any from the United States. If you order more from Lockheed, Raytheon, you're not going to get them until the 2030s, and by then you won't want them. They'll be too expensive. There'll be much better systems around, which the Europeans are capable of producing themselves with the benefit of Ukrainian Firepoint technologies. I mean, I sound as if I'm a salesman for Firepoint. I'm not. I know nothing else about them other than that
you don't have shares
what I've read.
Firepoint, no.
But anyway, no, I don't have shares in any of these things. But by 2030 something, I think the Europeans will have access to something much, much better and more economic than Patriot.
We don't have loads of time left, but that is what's happening with Firepoint. It's separate to this plan. I think it's with Leonardo and maybe it's just Leonardo who are working on a sort of an upgrade Iris system as well, right?
Yes,
there's an upgraded European native system.
And the SAM-PT NT, the new technology, that's an upgrade as well. I mean, they're all being upgraded, so they're all improving quite quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Question here from Tom, in light of what you said yesterday in the war briefing, which of course can be found on the Sky News app, and you'll do another one of those, I think, later. And you've mentioned it today, actually, we've been talking that this war has taken a turn. Yeah. Tom asks, where could the escalation of strikes from both sides lead, and how far could Putin go?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Putin will be pressured by the oligarchs, who are now getting quite edgy about all of this, that he will be pressured to come up with some, or go along with some sort of ceasefire proposal. But he won't. He certainly won't back off. But it's possible that we might be looking at a ceasefire, a semi-ceasefire, a ceasefire in the air, or something like that. Perhaps in the autumn or by the end of the year. That's possible. But I'm not going to hold my breath on this, because he is so locked into going forward on the war, and until somehow he's removed, then the war will stay on as far as he's concerned.
Yep.
Even if there is some sort of step down in the level of attacks or the level of hostilities.
We've got about 5 or 6 questions left, and I want to get through them, but I'm running
I'll
short
be
of time.
quicker.
No. Well, I was going to tell you to be quicker. I would never normally tell you to rush, Michael, but I'm the one who's got the time constraints today. So we'll get through these in sort of rapid fire if we can. Question here from Andy, and it's around Patriots. What steps can Ukraine take to protect infrastructure without them?
Not much. It can distribute infrastructure, which it is doing. So given that you know that ballistic missiles will always more or less hit the target they're aimed at, the best thing you can do is distribute the target as far as possible. Right. And that means moving things around and hiding them. That's the best thing they can do. Yeah.
Which I suppose they've probably been trying to do.
That's
anyway,
what they're trying to do, and they'll have to do more of it. But you can't move railway sidings, you can't move marshalling yards and so on.
Craig asks, again on Patriots, and we haven't quite got to this point, is the UK making something similar to Patriot, and how exposed are we in case Russia?
Yeah, we're totally exposed.
Talk about Type 45.
We got two. Yeah, well, there you are. You said it. The Type 45. So we've got Sea Viper, which can bring down ballistic missiles, and that's based on the Aster. And the new Aster is the Aster 30, and we're looking at a new Aster 30 Block 1. NT, new technologies. So we've got two things. One is the Sea Viper and the Aster. The Sea Viper to go on Type 45s. The Aster 30 is both for, well, the Aster goes on Type 45s, but it can be used in other ways as well. Yep. It can be deployed on other sorts of systems and from the ground. So we're doing those two things, but those are the only two that we're developing at the moment. We're talking about the architecture of a bigger system, but essentially we are more open than our allies to ballistic missile attacks.
We are exposed.
For the time being.
Darren K asks, is the Ukraine war keeping the UK economy afloat since we're sending so many weapons? Think about that.
No,
Head shake.
We're not sending weapons. No, I mean, we were at the start. We sent, the NLAWs that we had and some of the anti-tank stuff that we had and Javelin, which were these, small arms, relatively small systems.
That's stockpile stuff. It's not like we're making it and then giving it,
Absolutely
selling
not,
over.
No. And we gave some Storm Shadow missiles, the ones we could use, or we could afford to give, as it were. The Block 1, which it then was, which is like the first tranche, we would have retired them, but we gave them to Ukraine. Easy to do. But we're not sending weapons to Ukraine because we don't have any to send. I mean, what we are doing is helping Ukraine with training, and with technology development. And that's the main contribution, actually, that we do have some very, very good technologies. Small, medium enterprises and BAE systems and so on are working with the Ukrainians because it's a two-way street now.
I was going to say,
the Ukrainians have got an awful lot to give to us in terms of experience and technologies and breakthroughs that we can help commercialise. Yeah.
Question then from Fraser. What's happening with the North Koreans? Are they sending more troops? You mentioned their missiles that are being used anymore.
The KN-23. Which have been being delivered, and they will be delivered, and that's a good enough ballistic missile. Got about a 500-mile range. Again, with Russian guidance, it more or less hits what it's pointed at. Troops. Zelensky keeps saying that they've got 30,000 troops ready to deploy, but he's been saying that for some time, and there's no sign of them yet. You can't rule it out. And it may be that Putin will think, look, I need one more push to get Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, and I need another 30,000 troops to go on to suicide attacks
send into the meat
and just take it. Right. That's plausible, but it hasn't happened yet.
Not yet. Question here from John from Lithuania, who thanks you for your brilliant analysis, Michael, and asks about the claims from the Baltics and Poland that Russia's about to do something. We've talked about it in this room as well. Floated for late summer. He said that's getting close. What do we think? Yeah,
well, again, it's not really the time of year. I know what you mean, but it's really the pressure that Putin is under, as we were saying a few minutes ago. If Putin feels that this war is turning bad for him on several fronts, his next most likely option is to distract attention, to tell the Russian public that it's really NATO that they're facing, not Ukraine, which has always been his narrative. and somehow try to create another crisis in the Baltics and Poland, from which you will get some strategic advantage and frighten the other Europeans into pulling the plug on Ukraine. That's always been the scenario. It's a bit closer now than it was earlier in the year, which is not to say it's about to happen, but it's a plausible fear. Yeah. It's a plausible scenario that I'd say it's probably a 50-50 shot at the moment.
Wow.
50-50. Yeah. And it's getting closer.
Yeah. Something we need to keep a very close
eye. And when I say that, I would just back it up by saying the governments in Poland and the 3 Baltic states take it very.
Oh yeah,
very
they think it's going to happen. Yeah,
they would put it as more than 50-50.
Yeah, they think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Final question then for today. Sorry to rush you through these last ones, but I do appreciate your questions. I hope we've got all your questions answered, which we have, without me asking loads. Final one from Captain Sparkle. What's your best guess for Russia finally coming to the table to negotiate a settlement, or do we just have to wait until Putin is no longer among us?
It's either of those. I mean, I keep trying to think this one through. I don't think Putin won't give in, but he might try to find some sort of device to step the severity of the war down on both sides without calling it a peace conference or peace.
You'll have
deal.
to have something, though, won't you? You'll have to have all of the Donbass, those cities. You'll have to have something that you can say he's
walk away with something.
Yeah, he's achieved one of his aims.
Yeah, and the Ukrainians now have got enough grip over Crimea and over vulnerability inside Russia to have something to set against that. So they do have something. They do have some cards in their hand, as President Trump would say. I suppose my best guess is that the Ukrainians have got to get through this, what would be a really, really awful winter for them. And maybe into next year, into spring next year, maybe this war will take a different strategic turn. And that will partly depend on what other nations decide to do, how the Europeans react by then, what happens in the midterms in November, and what President Trump thinks his legacy is likely to be. Because he can turn on a sixpence on this. If everything else is collapsing for him in terms of his legacy, he might go back to Ukraine and say, I will find a way of pushing Putin to some sort of deal. That's plausible. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Or pushing Zelensky to some kind of deal.
Yeah, well, Zelensky is already there. I mean, in the sense that Zelensky's agreed to all that Trump originally wanted last March.
Minerals deal, all that
stuff. That was there. And he said, we wanted a ceasefire in place, and then we'll talk. But since then, Trump has gone on to the Putin side of the argument and said, well, you've got to surrender to call it a peace deal. And the Ukrainians said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll do what you said we should do a year last March and have a ceasefire in place and then discuss things.
Yeah. So much more to come. All right.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it there for this week, Michael. We're going to have a war briefing from you later on, so look out for that. It'll be in your feeds and on your telly as well, where you'll find it.
When we've done it, yeah.
When you've done it. You've just been working hard. And as I said, I'll be off next week, but I'll be back the week following that. So we'll do one of these, you and I again. I'm sure you'll be back next week with someone else here, but you and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy your afternoons.